Ta-da! Thanks, James. What a hell of a start. Anyway, all right. So, hey, it's Taishihan Miller here with this week's episode of KUDEN. I could not find the switch for things on my screen here, and it's a good thing that James is in the background. Anyway, all right. So we'll start episode 211 here in just a few minutes, but I don't know how many I expect to be on live for this one because this is actually a national holiday. For most people, it's another Monday off, extra day, picnic day, whatever, but it's our Memorial Day. And so as a combat veteran myself and somebody who came back from bad things, here we are, right? So anyway, actually, this episode might seem a little, I don't know, in sync with the meaning behind the holiday, but I promise you it was something that I had scheduled a long time ago or a while back when I was scheduling out episodes, and I didn't give any thought to how this might sync up. But here we are. So we're going to talk about some the way the warrior kind of relates to some key pieces, right? Sacrifice and those kind of things, right? So we'll dive into it as soon as we get back.
Question is this: how are self-defense and success-minded people like us, concerned citizens worried about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and the things we care about from the monsters we know exist in the world? How do we train in a way that gives us the skills, knowledge, and understanding we need without becoming paranoid fighters or killers ourselves, and yet still allows us to be the hero protector the world needs us to be? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Jeffrey Miller, and welcome to KUDEN Radio, real training for real people in a real world.
All right, here we go. Episode 211. I got James hiding in the wings. It's normally what he does anyway, unless I push a button and make him pop up. Anyway, all right. So this is, as I'm recording this is Memorial Day, May 27th of 2024. So for those of you listening to this in the future, hopefully not too far out in the future, it might put a little bit of context on things, unintentional context, but also there's an announcement I'll be making somewhere in the middle of the show that if you're watching this or listening to this way too far out into the future, you will have missed a huge opportunity. But anyway, we'll leave that for later. So here's the thing, right? In Japanese martial arts, at a minimum, that's where my forte tends to be. In this form of warriorship, there is a saying about the warrior accepting death, and it's often mistranslated as the warrior wanting death, or I don't know, for those of you who are Trek geeks and whatnot, like I am, right? There's this warriorship kind of thing that shows up a couple of different ways in the Star Trek world, right? Romulans, Klingons, that kind of thing, and they tend to have this, right? You die a glorious death, kind of thing, and it's not that, but at the same time, the warrior doesn't seek death. They just recognize that in this realm, there's a high probability, right? And you're going on a battlefield, you're dealing with people who, they're not morons, right? It's kind of like in the world of self-defense, right? A lot of folks, I've seen classes. I mean, there's a lot of really, really good folks out there, a lot, right? And whether I've trained with them personally, or I've just seen them in training, or I know what their background is, whatever, right? Peers and whatnot from across the globe, right? That I've either met or seen or heard about, seen across the dojo, whatever. They've seen the face of war, right? And they carry themselves a certain way. There's a certain look in their eye, and I don't mean that PTSD driven, one step from insanity kind of thing. It's not that, right? But there's a look, right, from folks that have been there, right? There's also other telltale signs when it comes to discussing backgrounds and discussing history and experiences and things like that, we can usually tell when somebody's making up a story, that kind of thing, right? But either way, so I've been taking you week by week, for those of you who have been following along, taking you week by week through these what I'm calling bricks, right, in a wall, in the fortress, critical areas that we need to focus on, right? And this comes in the wake of our 200th episode anniversary that we had 11 weeks ago now. So we're into what? Holy shit, that was almost 3 months ago, James. Holy crap! Wow. Alrighty then. So anyway, I know what I put up as the title, and we are going to be diving into that. Both the omote, right, the obvious kind of thing, right, that the elephant in the room, but also the Uda side of things, the hidden, the maybe not so obvious kind of things. And I'll share a story here in a minute that will highlight that, and then it'll kind of straddle both sides. But the original title that I had jotted down, the theme, the premise, right, for this episode, for this training, was it's about warriorship, damn it. Right. But there are there are many things about warriorship that are not a part of the use of the word warrior, right? And when I say the use of the word, I mean this was one of those words like, I don't know, well, I do know, right? Enlightenment, wisdom, what else, James? Ninja. How about ninja, right? I just saw another damn ninja device that came out, an invention that they're now selling that they slap the word ninja on, right? Or whatever, right? That that people tend to use, right? I remember all the way from growing up, right? The word warrior slapped on sports teams, whatever, right? And now there's all kinds of like social warriors and whatever. And I get it, right? But what I tend to see, and maybe it's just my my little part of the world observing, it's not a little corner, right? With the internet and with international travel and going to Japan and military service, putting me in many different places in the world. As a matter of fact, I just had this conversation with my mom. She called to wish me a happy Memorial Day, which made my brain lock up, because memorial is a remembrance of things that are no longer around, including people, right? And I get it, right? I've had people in the past either tell me flat out or just make those, neat little Facebook posts, right, about having the meaning of the day shoved down their throat. Why can't they just enjoy their picnic in peace? Which again makes me chuckle, right? But I don't know. Happy Memorial Day. Anyway, so but I told her the same thing that I tell everyone else, right? This isn't for me. Yes, I'm a combat veteran, but what that means is I came back. Okay, so there's a side to this that we can't ignore, right? Because it's one of the things that separates this realm from, I'm going to use the term mere martial arts as we think about it in the modern world. Okay. Now I understand martial. Martial means warfare, right? Um, and ego would always like to see itself in the best light, toughest light, whatever. Okay. But well, let me tell you a story that'll highlight this. Many years ago, it was the first time that I had taken my children, including my stepchildren. Two of them were all about war games, video games, those kind of things. But they were also, to say that they were a handful is a major understatement. Okay, but we took them to DC. My wife and I are really big on like road trips and taking the kids to historically relevant kind of places, right? So they can understand more than just reading about it in school or having their teacher tell them or having to pass a test on something or whatever, right? In the military, we used to call it boots on the ground, right? So take them to this place, right? And so during this visit, we took them to Arlington Cemetery, right? For those of you who don't know or who are outside the country or whatever, Arlington is our national military cemetery. There's a whole bunch of history behind it, some good, some not so good, whatever. But it's where those who lost their lives in combat, right? They have the distinct honor of being buried there, if there is such a thing as a distinct honor, right? Because most of these things are for the living, not the deceased, right? There's a book that I just recommended to one of my Mikyo students because they were a caregiver to a family member who was, end of life kind of thing. And there's a really, really good book. It was written by a Tibetan Lama. I can't remember his name at the moment, but it's called The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. And the monk made a really, really good point near the beginning of the book. I'm one of those guys that read the introduction, so I understand the premise of the book that actually precedes chapter 1. And he equated it to many other things, many other spiritual traditions and things that are like this. And he said, it's for those who are helping with end of life with the person that's passing. Yes, there are things here for the person who is passing, but many of these things, right, whether they're funeral services, they're memorials, whatever, they're for the people left behind. They're to help with mental, spiritual, emotional things, right? To help with everything from closure to making sense out of things or whatever, right? But anyway, took the kids to Arlington, and when you first enter, there's a small sign. At least there was. I haven't been there since before the whole COVID outbreak in 2020, but there was a small placard at the front, right? Because you enter, the entrance is into the information center / gift shop and all that, right? And then you enter into, you go through another door, exit this building. You're actually in the cemetery. But take them through their, not their typical selves. They're a little bit curious, but I think part of them might have been a little bit unnerved because we were taking them to a cemetery, right? But anyway, you leave you exit the information center. For those who haven't been there, you exit the information center and gift shop onto the grounds. And before you even step down off of the, I don't know what you call it, then it was kind of a landing. It's not really a porch, but maybe, right? There was a giant sign, right? As a matter of fact, there's one very similar to it in Kamakura, Japan, where I take students. It's one of the sites of one of these giant Amida Buddha statues, right? And again, there's like one of these signs. That one's in Japanese. The wording's a little bit different, but the meaning's the same. So anyway, there's a sign that greets you, right? It basically reminds you that these are hallowed grounds, and that this is a place of remembrance, and mind your P's and Q's. Anyway, so I stopped the children, specifically these two, and I said, "Can you read that sign?" Well, yeah. Oh, good. Okay, read it. Do you understand it? Yes. Okay, good. And then I pointed to several people who were walking around with flowers, and looks like they were either coming back from or going to the grave sites of family members or friends. And all I said was, "Do you see those people?" Yes. Good. If these words aren't enough for you, I want you to remember that if you act inappropriately here, I'm going to be the least of your concern, because these people are here because their family member is here. Do you know what that means? So they were the quietest and most respectful that they had been in a long time in this place, because it was significant, and they had lots of questions, along the way. But one of the things I had to remind them was, video games are great, but this place is a reminder that, one, war should be avoided at all cost. Okay, so it shouldn't be thrown around as an option just because our side's not getting its way or whatever. Okay? It's not something you wish upon anyone. And if you've ever gone through it, if you ever go through it, I promise you, if you ever go through it, it's not something that you jump to as a primary option. You accept it as a possibility or something that may have to happen, but any warrior knows that it's not and shouldn't be a first option, right? But the big reminder here is that in real life war, unlike video games, there is no reset button. There are no do-overs. There are no multiple lives to get you farther and farther down the field. And anyway, it was an interesting moment, but this is in contrast to the sport gladiator thing or whatever, where afterwards you get to talk smack, you get to ask for a rematch, you get to do all of these things. Anyway, so I'm not going to dive too deep into this idea of the warrior accepting death, the warrior, as Takuma Sensei, Hatsumi Sensei, my teacher's teacher, he had many different, of course I got these secondhand, but many different quotes about being a warrior, right? Things like, nobody in their right mind would choose to be a warrior, right? When you're up at 4 a.m. in chafing armor and it's freezing cold and you're in bare feet or sandals out in a dew-soaked grass or muddy area, right? Training when everybody else is spooning with their honey, still asleep. But somebody has to. And some of us choose to do that, right? Interesting. I can't speak for anybody in any other country, but interesting little fun fact that I just discovered. For those of you living in the United States, right? Only 10% of the population, male or female these days, right? Only 10% of the population has ever served. And based on current numbers, is serving. Okay? And that's a max, right? Unless there's like an actual war kind of thing. but the numbers still don't bump up a whole lot because there's lots of folks, that suddenly the hangnail is the thing that prevents them from going anywhere. But just an interesting little thing. But anyway, right? It's part of the reality, right? But this isn't just the martial side, right? And I think I put it on the slide, right? That people tend to gravitate toward that side of warriorship, right? The fighting and the overt warfare, right? But this is an aspect in Nikyo as well. My folks that are going through the Goshinbo program, right? I think last class they just completed the 5 practices, and then we've got what do we have, James? 3-4 more classes. I think it's 3 more classes where we're doing more of the elemental power rings and stuff to kind of round things out. But what they've discovered in Japanese Vajrayana, well, in Vajrayana in general, right? Nikyo, for most people that know the Japanese term, there is a lot of association with warriorship, right? It shows up in the mandala quite a bit. There's a whole hall, right? There's these 5 characters, one of which represents you as the practitioner. But there's this whole hall that represents and is symbolic of your army that you will storm the gates of enlightenment with, or that will help you storm the gates of enlightenment. There are these different implements and symbols that show up as swords or whatever, but they represent success. They represent the ability mentally, right, and physically to be able to cut through illusion, right, cut through our own internal delusions and whatnot. There's one of the practices is actually known as donning the diamond armor, right, and you are symbolically placing the helmet on your head, tying the lacings and cinching the knot, but it's implied that the rest of the armor is already on, right? Because the helmet is the last thing that you put on after you've donned, right? The armor, DONNED. For those of you, maybe there might be some distortion in the audio, but there's a side to that as well, right? As a matter of fact, in the East, I believe it's in Sanskrit, but don't quote me on that. There are two perspectives on this idea of warriorship, right? One is the overt that most people in the martial arts and whatnot think of, right? Suited up in armor, weapons, right? Go to fight the dragons, the enemy, whatever. Okay? But the other one is synonymous of householder, right? It's the dad, it's the mom, it's the one who, they set up house, they start a family, and then there's a whole bunch of different dragons and problems and challenges and enemies, right, that have to be fought or kept at bay, or they fight battles that their children never know about until their children become adults and realize, holy shit, those people that I thought were dumb adults, that they were always tired. They why can't they have more money? Why can't they do these things? Whatever. It doesn't make any sense. Suddenly it makes sense, right? Because they're now in the thick of things, right? Fighting battles. But there's a whole realm, right, on the mandala. Some of you have gone through this, where we have these 5 realms on one of the specific mandala, and each realm is or can be called a realm of enlightenment. Because most people, when they say enlightenment, they think they know what it means, but they're throwing this big old vague net out over out over something, right? Or they see it as a crossing a goal line, right? I'm enlightened about, or I'm enlightened, period. But it's not that. It's not that cut and dry, right? But there are these different realms, right? And one of those realms is the realm of the warrior. Okay? It's the realm of the one who sacrifices for a greater cause, right? And it is the realm of sacrifice. But it's also the realm of skillful means. It's also the realm of all accomplishing action. Well, how can it be all of those things? Well, it's because things are not as black and white, zeros and ones as ego tries to make it, which is why a lot of people have so many friggin' problems in trying to get ahead or get things taken care of or resolved, because ego is still trying to operate like a 6-year-old. And I'm not knocking anybody. I'm just talking about how if we don't know any better, and that's really the better way of looking at it. If we don't know any better, if we haven't been, I'm going to say this two different ways. If we haven't been exposed to different perspectives, the Enlightenment teachings, however we want to describe that, right? Then again, we're going to be operating based on not knowing any better. But what's even worse than that is being exposed to things like that and dismissing them, or ego just, that's bullshit. That's, that shit doesn't work. That's an old way of looking at whatever. Okay. If we dismiss it, it's hard enough to bump into somebody who understands something that would make our life easier. Okay? Like a warrior who survived bloodshed and flat out tells you that's not someplace you want to go, unless you have no choice, right? But we're just going to dismiss that, and then from our soapbox be screaming, that we need to go to war, we need to wipe out the other side, whatever. Okay. So anyway, the obvious side of this, right, is the warrior's sacrifice, right? Willing to lay down his or her life for whatever this thing is, right? This grander cause, right? But that person has to, and I don't know that they get over their individual nature, right? Because we still have dreams and wants and all those kind of things. But one of the questions in this realm is, what are you willing to sacrifice for? What do you see as more important than you? If there came a choice, or there came a time where you had to make a choice, that it's more important for it to be in the world, him, her, they, whatever, than you, that you would say that them or that thing, right, was more important. And I'm willing to do what I need to do to make sure that it stays, right? That takes a certain level of maturity. That takes a certain level of I don't know, connection or whatever. And I'm not saying that everyone doesn't have it. Everyone does have it, right? Parents, right? Not all, because I had some that didn't, but parents, by and large, will sacrifice things, right, to make sure that their children have things, right? Whether it's that last bite of food or it's sacrificing time, right? I'd rather be watching, I'm speaking third person, but I'd rather be watching a cool action flick than another episode of Thomas the Tank Engine, right? But my grandson likes to spend time, and that's one of his things. So, and if he's not watching it, he's doing what he was just doing earlier out on the porch and pretending that he's a train, right? Going around. So, hey, watch. Okay, I'm watching. Right. So anyway, but sacrifice it's one of those things, right? It's whether we're talking about police, we're talking about firefighters, volunteer or paid, we're talking about parents, we're talking whatever, right? There's this ideal of using whatever resources, skills, and whatnot, right, to make sure that something that I see as grander, right? It's a grander, whether it's an ideal or it's a person or whatever. I mean, it's one of those things, right? So, well, but these things show up in other ways as well. James, I just realized I'm not laughing as much during this episode. I apologize, right? So, yeah, throwing a little giggle every once in a while. But again, there's this idea, right? And sacrifice tends to start to lead toward these concepts of death and dying, right? Which is usually what scares most people off, right? I'm not doing that, right? I'm not willing to lay down my life for anything. Okay, well, okay, today, right? That may change, okay? But that's the obvious side, right? James, was it in maybe it was a recent black belt class, maybe it was a whiteboard Wednesday. I don't know. These lessons tend to all bleed across each other, but I've made the reference several times here just of late about how messy self-defense is, how messy that aspect of combat is, right? That it's it's not something to be looked at lightly, right? Or I'm just going to learn these techniques and I'm going to stick to my favorite fighting style, or this is my preferred way of doing things, or whatever, because the consequences of not having the techniques or the tools or the tactics or whatever that you need for any given situation, which is really funny because a lot of folks will post on not just mine, but any other self-defense or martial arts teachers videos or whatever, right? That doesn't work. That's not the way it's done. Whatever, right? And I think that they are extremely lucky, right? I'm gonna go in that direction, right? They're extremely lucky that all of the fights that they've ever had were with people who fight like them, right? And they didn't need other skill sets because and this idea that everybody knows how a fight happens, everybody knows what to do. They've obviously never been outside of their little bubble, and they must be oblivious to the news stories about how people are killed or attacked every single day, right? Or they've become really, really good at assessing a situation and only picking and choosing those battles where they're reasonably sure that it's going to be like everything else that they've done, right? Because things are messy, right? It's just it's messy. So anyway, this would be a good time to segue, because I want to really spend most of the time on the other side of things, because it's going to cross over to not just our training, but the dragon realm of things, right? The Uda side of things, the life, right? Being successful in whatever endeavors we're working on, right? So James, got to fire yourself up. Who's on? I don't see high numbers on this one, but again, it's a holiday. So, who's on? Question, comment.
Well, it looks like the only person that's commented so far is Dave Fletch. He says, "Howdy," and the Japanese National Cemetery on Mount Koyasan had the most reverent spiritual feel of any cemetery I have ever visited. Was a really amazing experience for me.
Awesome. Say people that travel, huh? But Dave's also a vet as well. Combat vet, Dave, I think. I don't remember. They tend people that have been there, and they don't have to have served in the military or anything like that, because I know a couple of folks that had stints as gangbangers. And as a matter of fact, there was a friend that I met a long time ago. I was in the military and had gone to England for a seminar, and I met him as he was a student in one of my friends' training groups, and he was just this happy, laughing, fun-loving guy. Really on the short side. If you think I'm short, he was much shorter, and it was quite the surprise to find out that he. How did he put this? He was a former applicant to the UK branch of Hell's Angels. I'm like, that completely blows the paradigm. He goes, yeah, I know, I'm not that guy anymore. That's why I'm a former applicant. But when I started in this training, I was an applicant, and I was looking for training that would allow me to do what everybody knows that they do, right? Kick ass, take names, do what I need to do. And I looked across martial arts, and why would I not do this one or something really similar based on what I know as a club I'm probably going to have to do. And this is where, now again, we have to remember that I'm talking mid 80s at that point, right? So a lot of the dragon realm of training, a lot of the spiritual stuff, a lot of the life mastery lessons, not a lot of, right? I mean, it was the art at that point was dominated by that stuff, right? And I know that lots of people got involved because, of martial arts and all that, but back in those days, and I'm sounding like an old guy, right? But back in those days, easily 9 out of 10 people that came through the dojo door or the seminar door or whatever had more than just a little bit of prior martial arts experience, right? A lot of people were black belts, or they were we have like the number of cops and feds and undercover operatives and all kinds of stuff, right? Military people. That was a huge part of the mix. But then there was also a lot of people who came to the art because when they got involved in martial arts, this was really something that they were looking for and couldn't find it. So they, did the next best thing, or, did the art hopping or whatever you might want to call it. But what really drew a lot of people to this art was the way Hatsumi Sensei and Stephen Hayes at the time, because they were the predominant voices, were speaking about things, right? That there was more of a holistic approach, and it was this warriorship thing, and there was a spiritual side and a mental side, to not just add to the physical, but to balance it out. And it just drew a lot of people, right? And so I think he was exceedingly lucky as well, because my peer, right, that ran that training group, he was also a senior. He was quite a bit ahead of me, but we always saw each other as friends and got our asses kicked equally well, or equally it was an equal balance, right, between he and I if we were at seminars and stuff. And but anyway, when I met this guy, I said, so what changed? And he said, well, two things. One, I thought that I was going to meet a bunch of people, teachers and students, who were, because he had this huge chip on his shoulder, huge, right? Obviously, right? You don't just be an applicant to Hell's Angels and decide that, you're going to toughen up after you get there. But he's going to find a bunch of people that were like that. So there would be a sense of comfort. And so, hanging out with tough guys, doing tough guy shit, beating, breaking, whatever, coming close to killing each other, that kind of thing. And he met people that were just the opposite. Now, they were all really tough people, but he had never experienced that capability with hearts that were smiling, joking, that kind of thing, right? It really unbalanced him. So that was part of it, right? So he had to stay, right, to be infected by this by this mentality or this energy or whatever. He said, but the other thing that did it was the techniques. Again, remember, this predated soft training. It's not that we didn't do things slowly for safety and that kind of stuff, but it wasn't this touchy, don't cause any kind of discomfort whatsoever kind of thing, which was never what was meant with this idea of soft training, right? For those of you who missed it through multiple episodes, soft training came about as words that the Japanese chose, the senior master teachers chose to, as kind of a reminder to not try to hurt your partner. What the hell's up with that? I mean, we're doing these techniques and stuff. Why would I not try to hurt him? Isn't that what the technique does? Yes. But the operative word here is try. Don't intend to hurt your partner because you're just going to force things, and that's what was happening. People were hurting each other left and right, but not because they were really good at the techniques. It's because they were shitty with the techniques, and they were just putting a whole bunch of force and speed in things, right, to make it work. But the lesson is these techniques, properly applied at whatever speed, hurt all by themselves. So you don't have to put extra intention in. Right. But anyway, he started experiencing these techniques and things and what they did to a human body. Because up to that point, fighting was fighting. And yeah, I do want to beat, break, and if necessary, kill this person because they're in a rival gang or whatever, right? But there was still this idea, right, that we're hitting, we're kicking, we're stomping, we're choking, right? And I could hit you with fist, I could hit you with a sap, I could hit you with chain, whatever. But what he experienced and what he encountered was the difference between like a guy with an axe hacking at trees and a surgeon very precisely taking things apart. And what he told me was he was exposed to and learned techniques that the coolness factor faded very, very quickly. And what took its place was, holy shit, that is hellacious. That is borderline demonic, right? And he hit a point where he realized he didn't want to do that kind of thing to another human being unless he absolutely had no choice and somebody was coming at him or somebody that he cared about. There was this huge transition, right? And I think that happens quite often to warriors, to soldiers who shift into that mindset. whatever. Where I know when I first enlisted in the military, right? We're talking late 80. Well, I actually enlisted in 1980, very early on, July of 1980. Right. Didn't go to basic training for a couple of months, but either way, and the mindset, right? Going to kill a commie for mommy. There's this John Wayne kind of thing that went away after the first deployment or two, right? For most, right? If they didn't like wash out afterwards because they ended up just crying like babies. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that they had never given any consideration to that, because it's much easier to play at being a warrior in field exercises and whatnot than it is to be around things that are blowing up and bullets are flying and friends are dropping and those kind of things. Anyway, so yeah, he just kind of bumped into that issue, right? And so that was a life change for him. Before I go into the Oda, let me I'm going to revisit the Memorial Day thing that I started when I started the episode. And I don't remember if I actually told you what I told my mom or not when she called to wish me a happy Memorial Day, which again, it still makes my brain lock up. Like, happy Memorial. That's like going to a funeral and saying, "Hey, happy funeral day," right? Hey, happy let's bury Fred Day or whatever, right? But we learn words, right? Like, it's a holiday, man. This is Labor Day. This is Memorial Day. This is Remembrance Day. This is whatever. Okay, but what do they mean? Well, I don't know. It means I get an extra day off and there's a picnic. Cool, right? Have a great day. Okay. This probably happened 5 years ago, maybe longer than that, because it's already been 2 years outside of the COVID recovery, 4 years since it started. So yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe closer to 10 years. But it was one of the first times that I corrected someone on Memorial Day for thanking me for my service. And while I still feel funny about that, and when I say funny, I mean peculiar, not funny, haha, because I didn't do it for any of those kind of things, and I understand the sentiment, but it still makes me feel weird. But it wasn't Veterans Day, right? It was Memorial Day, and I said, no, this is not a my day thing, right? This is a day that, for remembering, those who didn't come back. And what he said was, I've never done it. I've never been there, but I can just imagine that even though you came back, some part of you still died. Some part of you is lost. It's gone, right? That it was sacrificed. And I had never thought about that. Right? But either way, a little segue, right, about this whole Memorial Day thing, because that's what I told my mom. She called me and wished me that, and I said, "Mom, this isn't a day for me." Right? I mean, I appreciate the sentiment, because it's your son served, and I get it, right? But my mom is what, 83 now, 81, 83, 83. So she'll be 84 in December. And so it could be a memory thing, but what she said was, I didn't know that. I didn't know that, like, Armed Forces Day is a day to honor those who are currently serving. Veterans Day honors those who served, and Memorial Day honors those who lost their life while they were serving. Okay. And actually, Veterans Day is actually an overlay, at least here, right? Veterans Day, the date for Veterans Day was originally a remembrance day for the signing of the armistice, the ceasefire from World War One, and then Veterans Day was overlaid over it as a way to, because it was obviously same day, right? All these veterans, all these combat veterans had come home and whatever. Anyway, sorry, little side street. So I'd never considered the whole dying thing, but certainly didn't come back the same way I left. Anyway, so let's switch gears. But we're going to stay with this whole idea of sacrifice and death and dying. So we're going to shift to the life mastery side of things. And I've had lots of teachers outside of military service, outside of martial arts and whatnot, mentors who have either discussed this directly or it came up as an indirect kind of thing. They didn't say the words, but it's still implied, right? And so, again, if we think about on the model of this realm of the warrior, right? The idea of skillful means, right? What you're doing is taking what you know, and it actually matches up with the conceptualization processes in the brain, right? You take what you know, what you've learned in all areas, not just in a box, right? This is martial arts, so I'm only going to do that, right? You guys can post a comment or whatever, and James can check it later. Have you ever learned something in class, martial arts class, right? In training, and it surprised you and almost made you chuckle because you go, well, shit, I used to do that as a prank to my friends back in high school, right? I remember I remember one time, I don't know if it was the first time, but it was one of those very, very early times when we did this flanking maneuver, right? This punch or kick comes in and you do this little shift around with a hoko, right? This surround, the translation is like sense around, but you shift around and you end up behind him, right? And there's lots of different ways to do it. Chokehold, grabbing the shoulders, whatever, right? But you suddenly pick up that trailing foot and you toe stab the back of his knee to get him to buckle, right? And my teacher does this, and I instantly had a flashback to high school, walking up behind, because we didn't have backpacks back then. Everybody carried their freaking books, and you stopped off at the locker on the way and whatever. So the goal was to come up behind your friend and bop them behind the knee so they collapsed, and that moral response happened, and their books go everywhere, and then they're cussing you as you laugh on the way to your class, knowing they're going to be late because they're going to pick up their shit and move on. But I had this little flash, but I'm sure we've all had little moments like that. You're like, oh shit, I never thought about that. I never thought about using it that way, right? I know about that thing, but I never thought about using it that way, right? And that's one of these aspects, right, within this realm of skillful means, where you're able to take pieces or something from some other area, some other class, knowledge, whatever, and apply it to the situation that you're in a whole new way, right? I mean, this is where inventions come from, right? Inventors don't use anything that doesn't or hasn't existed, right? What they do is they put things together in a way that it has a whole new purpose, right? It hasn't existed that way before, right? It's the same thing with our techniques, right? You get really, really good at the kihon and the kihon no kihon and the kata, there were examples of how these things go together. But you hit a point where, what lineage does that come from? I don't know. If I think about it, it has kind of a flavor of this, but it could be that. And that element comes from over here, and whatever, right? I needed a solution for the moment, okay? And this is what produces this other thing I mentioned earlier, this all-accomplishing action, right? But there's some other things that kind of come before it, right? The assessment skills and not holding on to a set way of doing things, and there's a sense of freedom that comes with that, which is also comes from this wind realm as well, right? But it's this realm of sacrifice, right, that bears out, right? Because when I was talking about the warrior stuff and, being able to or willing to put your body in between bullets and the thing that needs to stay in the world more than you do or whatever, right? There's this giving up for a greater good or sacrificing for a greater good. But this is a part of personal development as well. And it's one of those things that stops most people because, I mean, it's one thing if you have a goal to go buy something or go on vacation or whatever. You don't need a radical change for that. You might need to work a few extra hours. Okay. I'm sacrificing time. Right. I might need to not keep buying the, overpriced latte espresso super supreme with cream. Uh, what do you call those things? Either way, right? The high end coffees or whatever the extravagant stuff is, so I can squirrel more money away, so I get whatever. Okay, so there is a level of sacrifice to that, but it's not where I'm going with this, right? Because if we really are going to follow the dreams that we have, if we're going to become the warrior, right? If we're going to become, more successful, if we're going to move out of, I'm speaking of me, right? If I was going to move out of the trailer park at a certain point in my life, right? To rent a nicer place or eventually own my own home or whatever, right? What was going to be necessary was more than just more time, more willpower, more discipline, more money, a different job, whatever, right? If I was going to be, I don't know, let's pick something that's wild and out there, right? A 15th plus Dan Dai Shihan under this person that I held in such high esteem that I never imagined. Yeah, I did. Being his personal student. I did almost from day one. How do I get to be that guy's student, right? If I was going to do that, and this took a long time to figure out, right? I was going to need to be a different person. I was going to need to be somebody who made different decisions, who was living a life where certain decisions weren't even options because they weren't even on the table, because I didn't think that way anymore. I was going to need to be a different quote unquote me, right? Which is something that's really, really highlighted in Mikyo a lot, right? Mikyo, I just, again, with the Goshinbo students, I was just describing, and I don't know if I've done it, I may have, right? Because we have so many different lessons, but in the 37 Fundamentals course, some of you are going through that online as a do-it-yourself course. You didn't do it as a live thing. Same thing with the first 7 steps. A lot of folks are going through that program on their own. So if you bump into this lesson, shoot me an email and go, yeah, you covered it there, or no, you didn't. One of the things that often comes up, especially in the context of Mikyo, is that it is a path of recreation, right? And this I do mention a lot, right? That these paths, whether it's Ninjutsu or Mikyo or whatever, is in going from living life accidentally. And I know we're making choices intentionally and things like that. But if we were to step back and look at things across the board, right? are the decisions that we're making, are they integrated? Are they related to each other? Or is it kind of, choice pops up, I make a decision. Choice pops up, make a decision. But they're not aimed at the same target. Right? I remember a conversation I had with a student a bunch of years ago. His name was Bud McHale. Bud and I had this mutual respect for each other. Bud was a few years older than I am now, and I was in my mid to late 20s. And I remember having a conversation with him. Bud owned his own, not only his own house, but a bunch of property on the side of a mountain. And he got involved in the training through his grandsons. He and his daughter, their mom, put them in first, and they were training and stuff. And then one day, he and his daughter came to me and said, "You know what? We're going to do this." Right now, when Bud first came to the training, he was not only much older, he was a retired Army Sergeant Major, flat feet, seriously overweight, made me look small. Just had come off of his second bypass surgery. Second, I think. Maybe, I don't think it was third, but maybe. So he wore, for those of you who understand the medical part of this with the heart problems, he wore a nitroglycerin patch, one on each arm, and carried an emergency vial of nitroglycerin around his neck. It was that bad. And so, obviously I have concerns about this. And he goes, no, the doctor said I need some extra exercise anyway. And I'm really intrigued about this because you keep saying that I can tailor things to me, to my needs. Yes. Anyway, long story short, within 6 months, Bud was using one nitroglycerin patch that he alternated arms, and the emergency vial was gone. So that was a pretty cool thing. But anyway, I remember one time I was out at his property, and we were prepping for an upcoming seminar, because we did everything out there from shooting seminars to wilderness survival, all kinds of stuff, land navigation stuff. And he was explaining these different business ventures, because he had these trees, and I was like, it was he had these cherry trees that were planted. I think they were cherry. Either way, right? And I just thought that he was doing this for landscaping, right? Had this stuff, and he said, no, that was one of my many misguided business ventures. I said, really? Yeah, it was an orchard. I was going to do this thing, and but then and he was discussing these different things that he had done. And I said, wow, you really did a lot. He goes, no, it's nothing like what you've done. And I'm like, at that point, I was like, I don't know, 28 maybe, right? He was somewhere between 61 and 64. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, you've done this. Yes. You've done this. Yes. You've turned down really good jobs because it was going to interfere with this training. Yes. He said, but all these other things that you've done, they're all absolutely related, right? Everything that you've done have all been in the service of this training or applied this training to that thing that you're doing. So it's all integral. It's all integrated. He said, all my stuff, it's all scattered. It was ideas follow, panned out or not. Idea follow, panned out or not. He said, you teach this stuff all the time. Have you not noticed that, mine was, it was intentional in the moment, but there was no connection with anything else. It was just good idea, follow, bad idea, don't follow, whatever. Right. And I said, well, I do try to live this stuff, but, I always fall short. but either way, right? So, but it was just one of those moments, right, where it was I don't know, I can use it as an example of the difference between living uh, living right, and living intentionally, because that's what Miko's about. It's what warriorship is about, right? It's about having a vision, and I don't mean like a hallucination vision. I mean like having a goal, having a vision, right? And then like everything is done to realize that thing. But right, the problem, I encountered it. My teachers have told me that they encountered it. Is that if we allow ourselves, and this is a subject that's going to be coming up with the Goshin folks again. If we allow ourselves to get over the programming and whatnot, or the belief systems and things, to allow ourselves to think bigger than the how the hell are you going to do that? That's not even possible thinking, right? If we're going to allow ourselves to do that, or we have a dream and we go, yeah, I'm going to do that, right? And we stop falling back on the you can't have your cake and eat it too, or if we can get past the not making decisions because of current circumstances. One of these things like just floored me a bunch of years ago, and it completely, well, after I got over myself, it completely changed the way I set goals. Because most people don't set goals, whether it's a vacation or, changing current life things or whatever it is, right? They don't do it until they have all their ducks in a row, so to speak. Right? Like I can't possibly do it now. I'll have to do it next year, or I have to do it when I have all these other things happening. Right? But the lesson was to set the goal, or to buy the car, or to whatever. For me, it was like paying a mentor to learn things, or take that trip to Japan, right? Because as soon as you buy the airfare, that's non-refundable. You better figure out how to get there, right? But the whole idea was to do it. As a matter of fact, the mentor that taught, well, actually, it was one of my teachers in this art. He said, "Stop waiting until someday to buy the new car, right? Because you don't have the money now. Right? Buy the car because you have a payment coming up in a month. You're going to need to figure out how to make that payment, right? And you're going to have to open up beyond what your current circumstances are to figure it out. Well, I need a job. I need a job with higher paying. I promise you'll be much more motivated to get that different job, or to make that thing happen, or whatever it is, once you have something looming, right? Because there's nothing quite like challenges to motivate us faster than comfort, right? Comfort causes acceptance, right? I don't really need it. I'm comfortable. Great. Fantastic. I wish you well. Okay. But discomfort, being uncomfortable, that's motivating, right? It's motivating to change the circumstances. But anyway, right? So we could talk all day long about sacrificing time, sacrificing money, sacrificing relationships, right? Giving up good for better, right? I'm not a big fan of best, because I don't think best exists, right? But cutting ties with people that, whatever. Okay? And again, sacrifice can go in lots of things. But what about sacrificing parts of myself? And I don't mean money and time and things like that. I mean, right, I have to be a different person to be living that life. Most people, and I know I did when I came at this idea, right, was I could stay exactly the way I am. I could continue to make the same decisions. I could continue to, spend money the same way. I could continue to make the same, or whatever, hang out with the same people, all that kind of stuff, and still have that prize, still have that reward, still live that life. And so I tried over and over and over and over. And here's where the death and dying comes in, at least in one realm, right? I was dying inside. My dreams were dying. My hopes were dying, right? And we all know what that kind of thing leads to, right? Resentment, aggravation, right? One of my favorite groups from way back, 60s, not 60s, 70s and 80s, group of Styx. And they had a song called Angry Young Man, right? And that's what it was all about, right? So what I had to come to grips with was that I had to jettison, I had to sacrifice, I had to cut loose, I had to kill certain parts of me, right? They had to die, okay? There had to be, and there were these little deaths along the way, right? Of different aspects that were not serving me. Okay? And what had to die first was, or at least had to be controlled, was ego wanting to hold on to stuff. It's kind of like, cleaning out your garage, right? Just go in there with this intent that, look, I don't even use this shit. Haven't looked at it in years. I'm just getting rid of it. And then you start going through it. Holy shit, I forgot about this. Well, can't throw that away. And next thing you know, you still got 75% of the shit in the garage that you hadn't looked at for years, but suddenly like nostalgia came back and whatever. And maybe not you, but I've experienced that. And so and training does this, right? Training, when we come to training, the first good chunk of training is this omote, frontal obvious side, right? We're taking on new things, right? Look at me, man. I'm loading up the toolbox with all these tools. And so we're augmenting ourselves. Look at me. Look, I'm augmenting, I'm adding stuff. Look at all the extra power I'm getting, right? But eventually, and I don't know if you've experienced this or not, or experienced it yet or not, but eventually it's just another damn technique. It's just another way to put things together. It's just another move. It's just another kamae. It's just another, okay? And boredom can start to set in because it's not enough, right? It's just another belt, right? So now what, right? Well, there's a perspective, because if all I was doing was collecting those things, that's going to get bored, or it's going to get boring, right? It's the why am I getting these things that's different, right? Talked about those things in the past, but what do I need to give up? Okay? I might need to give up that perspective. I might need to give up the chasing of rank, whatever, right? Because this, if we look at nature, right, the seed has to die for the plant to grow. So the seed stays, the seed doesn't change, it doesn't crack open, it doesn't die, right? So that plant can do its thing. Because the seed doesn't become a plant. The seed contains the potential, it contains all that stuff. And then when the soil, the nutrients, the moisture, the temperature and all that is just right, this thing cracks open, right? And right, taproot goes down, stem goes up, okay? But the plant has to die so that, right, more seeds get dropped. And then it's not just dying that way. It has to decompose and go back into the soil. So the soil doesn't become barren of the nutrients that the seeds need and the plants need when they first germinate, right, to grow. Right? These components have to go back. Right? But and that's part of the stuff that's on the kamiza, right, in the dojo, right? There's one or both of these things that are on the kamiza that represent this idea of sacrifice, right? There can be one or more dishes, small dishes, containers, right, of salt or rice. I have both. Okay. The salt crystal has to dissolve. It has to die, right, to give food flavor. It's symbolically representing sacrifice. The rice, that's a seed, right? It has to die, right? So that a plant can be born and grow and produce hundreds more grains of rice, right? But it's not just from that perspective. The rice sacrifices its life to nourish us as we eat, right? But there are all these little symbols, right, that remind us constantly, right, that for this other thing to take place, this grander thing to take place, this deeper, broader experience, for it to take place, something has to sacrifice. It was one of the exercises I introduced folks in the Goshenbo program to that had to do with mealtime prayers and eating. And there's this phrase in Japanese that many, not all, Japanese people say when they or before they eat. Right, your food comes, you look over the contents of the food, right, the bowl or the plate or whatever, and then you say itadakimasu. Okay? Itadakimasu. It's a saying of gratitude, but it's also a recognition of, and you can look it up. You can look it up online. It's also a recognition of the interconnectivity of things, right? But it's also a recognition of the sacrifice of everything from the plant or animal that died, or is, like, if you have a salad, it's in the process, right? And will as you eat it and digest it, to the labor and whatnot of the farmers and truckers and everybody that put that in front of you, or that contributed to putting it in front of you, right? And so there's this recognition, but part of it also, and this is a very Mikyo kind of thing on the exoteric side. This is where it came from, way back, right? A lot of Japanese have no idea where it came from. One of the modern translations of this that a lot of Japanese believe it to be is "let's eat," or, thanks for the food, or, that kind of gratitude. But it's not. It's the recognition of everything that went into providing me with a meal. And but the sacrificial kind of stuff, right? So there's this thing within Nikkyo, it's in Tendai mealtime prayers, where you don't leave any food on your plate. You don't waste food, right? So you don't take more than you can eat, and you don't throw anything away, because everything on your plate, right, that's edible, right, sacrificed its life for yours. And so we don't waste. Okay? We don't take that for granted, because to waste, to throw things away, right, well, I can't eat that much. Well, then don't take that much. Right? To do that is to disregard the sacrifices that were made for my nourishment, for my well-being, that kind of thing, right? And so I get the idea, right? A lot of people are like, well, be a vegetarian because, animals didn't die. Yeah, I know, but life is life. Okay, we also subsist on the transfer of energy from one to another. So anyways, it's just this huge thing, right? So, but where the word sacrifice can get us so far, right? As far as giving things up, sacrificing time, whatever. Okay. I think we need to go back to the understanding, acceptance, or just recognition that a warrior has, where they accept death, right? There is this total dedication to, right, doing what is necessary to accomplish the goal or die trying. But in this context of recreation, right, if we're working on something, then like to strengthen ourselves, right, to become more flexible, to whatever, right? I was sort of feeling sometimes of dying, right? But there's this giving up of things, right? There's a Japanese term in our martial arts, sutemi. Okay, sutemi. A lot of people see that as it's another word for break falls. It's another word. I get it, but sutemi means to sacrifice. Okay. When I first heard that word, I'm like, wait, sacrifice, like give up, just surrender? No, but kind of. Right? Sutemi, to sacrifice, is about giving up something that doesn't serve, or it's not working. Okay? And while that could be a position, right, and it could be a break fall kind of thing where I just drop to the ground and that unbalances him, and then I flip him over and stuff like that. But what we're looking at is whatever I'm doing isn't working, or it's not working fast enough, or I'm in a stalemate position, or I can hold my own, but man, am I cooking off energy or money or whatever, right? Or it's causing tension, it's causing aggravation, it's causing pain, right? And so we give up that thing, that position, whatever, right? Because if we let go, immediately things change. And then if we're paying attention, right, we can catch what's going on. But if we're in a stalemate, if we're locked in, whether it's habits or whatever, and nothing is changing, well, then we can't see anything else. All we can see is what we're holding on to. Okay? Ego wants everything else to change so it can stay the same. And therein lies the problem, right? Which is why in Mikyo we talk about the death of ego and whatnot. Although it's not a true death, it's just it has to be changed. Because if you killed ego in that part of our brain where ego resides, well, then you just be a drooling monkey staggering around the world because you couldn't navigate. Anyway, so one of my I'm going to call him an indirect mentor because I don't train with him face to face. I just soak up every freaking lesson that he puts out. Talks about this 80-20 rule and how to be the person that is enjoying the benefits of the goals that we want, whether it's whatever degree of black belt or whatever, right? We're going to have to give up. We're going to have to drop like 80% of the person that we are, right? There's a core set, about 20%. There's a core set of skills that you'll still hold on to because they're universal, right? But they have to go, right? Just like the habits and the thoughts and the preferences and all those things that you had when you were 9. You don't have those anymore. And if you do, you're probably not listening to this. Well, that was weird, wasn't it? If you do, you're probably not listening to this. So I'm not talking to you, right? Because if we really think about the stories that people tell us about what we did when we were 9 or 6 or 12 or whatever, we might remember them, but we can't relate very well. Right? They're gone. Okay? We're not the same person. There's something that stayed. There's something that, and I don't mean memories. There's something that's still driving. But the habits are different. The things that we avoid are different. The things that we're attracted to are different. Right? Why would tomorrow, or why would the attainment of whatever goals, right? This is one of those things that, and again, trust me, there's plenty of regret that I have around not having made different decisions or not having trained harder or not having gone to Japan sooner, not having asked a teacher to be my mentor sooner, whatever, right? Because I sacrifice time, right? The training process starts, or whatever it is, starts the day we commit to it and start moving forward, right? All the days that I procrastinated doing that or were afraid to open my mouth and say, will you be my teacher? Just wasted time, right? I sacrificed time and I sacrificed opportunities. And I ended up starting later than I could have, right? Which means I could have been somewhere sooner. Anyway, but training does this, right? In the beginning, training adds things. But training also takes things away. Right? If you stick around long enough, it takes things away, right? It kills things, right? You might have started to realize that, shit, right? I'm not as indestructible as I thought I was. It's not just because you got older. It's because, holy shit, that technique will take an arm right off. The skin's still connected, but everything on the inside is not. Okay. But lots of things change. Lots of things die. Certain types of fears die. Certain types of narcissistic tendencies die. Certain types of delusions of indestructibility or delusions about, being the prodigal child or whatever, right? So this is, as Hazmi Sensei would say, this is natural, right? And the point is to give into it, to accept that sacrifice is necessary, that it's not like we're not already in a process of dying. And I don't mean that like we have cancer, and I mean, some of us might not even know it yet, but it's not about that. How many millions of cells are dying in our body right now? Okay. They've run their course. They're going to come out in your poop tomorrow or within 36 hours. Okay. Or, fibers, whatever, coming out every time we exhale, right? We're in a constant state of change. So warriorship, right? Regardless of whether we're talking about the warrior preparing for a battlefield or, as I talked about earlier, the householder, that form of warriorship, right? It all comes down to engagement, right? Actually engaging with things. And being willing to give up things that don't serve us. As a matter of fact, if you are brave enough, determined enough, pissed off enough, whatever, you'll go out of your way to kill some of those things. To just either drop them by the wayside or throw yourself into experiences that will absolutely make them go away. And we have to do that so that we can say, I talked about dropping 80%, maintaining 20%, but you're always going to be 100%. What does that mean? Well, if I realize that something's in my way, if it's not serving me, and I'm going to kill it or drop it, what am I replacing it with? The thing that will serve me. So if procrastination doesn't serve me, then, okay, I'm going to drop procrastination, but what's it get replaced by? Do it now. Okay? It gets replaced by an imperative need to get things done and not hold them off. It's the opposite, right? So we're always 100%. Just like, when they talk about the conundrum between a glass being half full and half empty, right? That's perspective. That's dualistic thinking. Okay. Because while there's a certain amount of water in that glass, if you poured that water into a different size vessel, it wouldn't be half and half. But let's just get that out of the way, right? This is like, this technique's better than that technique, or I prefer this over that, or there's corrupt people in the world, and that's why I can't get ahead, even though I'm not really looking at myself and working on dropping my own bad habits. It's just easier to blame everybody else, right? If I look at that glass, right, the argument is the glass half full or half empty? The glass is always full. What the hell are you talking about, Sensei? Okay. The glass is always full. Doesn't matter how much water's in the glass. There's air in there too. Right? It's only when you start to separate, and that wasn't a trick. For people that want to jump to, that was just a trick, man, because, we're talking about the water. No, not talking about the water. As soon as you talk about the water, you limit everything. The glass is a vessel. It's always full. Unless you put it in a vacuum. It's not the way life works. Life doesn't happen in a vacuum. Anyway, I'm going to let this trail off. But what I do want to kind of, I'll mention this here in a minute. I'm talking about these limitations, right? And always doing things a certain way, or always being stuck on things. Way back when I first got started in this art, Hatsumi Sensei talked about there coming a day when you have to throw it away. You have to throw the art away. I always thought that was weird, right? Does that mean I get to an age where like I'm too old and I can't do it? And it's not that. Holding on to the style, some people call it Bujinkan, some people call it Ninjutsu, whatever. Holding on to a set way of doing things kills other opportunities. As soon as I choose a thing, I sacrifice all the potential to kill it, whatever, right? There's the death of all the other options. But one of the things we're shifting over to, not shifting over to, it's not like we're trading off one for another, right? We've been relaunching all the programs, right? Or the modules between white belt and black belt. And so one of the things that people run into when they hit module 3, which is what we typically call the fire mode, right? This preemptive, intercepting, offensive response, right? You're getting in there, right? The thing that they realize is that having come out of mod 1 and mod 2, they've wired their muscles for a defensive response, right? Moving away, winding up, all that kind of stuff, because they're looking at generating power and creating distance and all that kind of stuff. And here we flip it on them, and it just seems so alien, right? It seems like it's just really, really difficult because we just spent all this time, right, in defensive mode. We're the good guys. It is self-defense, right? Moving back here, whatever. And now you want me to get in there, right? I don't know if I can do that. Okay. But what do you do if you're in a situation and defense isn't working? Or I can't let them get the first shot, or it's all over, right? Or whatever. Okay? So that's why, for those of you who have been kind of following this along or not really understanding the logic, because like, the lineages are laid out a particular way, or this one's laid out this way and that one's laid, why are you doing it differently? Well, it's because the lineages have it as well. It's just not as easy to see. We have to recognize that back in the day, and again, this is something that people have to give up on. They have to give up on their either prior education or their belief that, who knows where it came from. I know I had this belief and I had to give up on it, right? Was that the past masters got involved in the training just like I did. Knowing nothing, I go to class and I learn this stuff, and then suddenly I'm a warrior, right? Most, if not all, of our nine schools have no beginners scroll. There's no basic scroll. But no, no, no. Right? Most of the people that came to training, I mean, one, if they had been in that clan or in that school the entire time, then they started their training when they were somewhere between the ages of 4 and 6. Started off as games, just grew out of it that way, right? They grew up with it, right? Most of us, I don't know about you, but I didn't. Most of us didn't grow up in the art. We started somewhere in our mid to late teens all the way through 20s. For some folks, 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever, right? It's not the same. And those who came in from the outside already had combat experience. So these lineages were not set up based on what most people think of as more of a modern context, right? Not, I don't even know, it was the 18th century, 18th, 19th century, where the dojo concept came into being. And here's the thing too, the dojo concept, maybe this should be for another time, but I'll just finish it out now. The dojo concept, when it was developed to teach wealthy people, right? If you weren't already warriors within the way we think of dojo now, right? These warriors who had no other money-making skills, right? Open dojo. The only people who had money to pay them for classes so that they could feed their families were the wealthy. They had time on their hands and they had money. So there's beliefs that people have about the way things were that are wrong. But they live in pain, they live in misery, and they live in confusion, frustration, whatever, for not being able to do things, because back in the day and in today's world, it's all fucked up because no. And there's no excuse today with all the friggin' information that's available on the internet. Although the new skill isn't being able to read and understand what you're reading or watch the video lesson or whatever. The new skill today is the skill of, well, one of them is cross-referencing things and not just watching one video or reading one article or whatever and being lazy about it and assuming, right? It's being able to vet information. It's having resources that you can go to and go, I read this, I saw that video and whatnot, but this one over here says all those are wrong, and it's the only right one. Which one do I believe? You can believe whatever you want. It's not a matter of belief, right? Sometimes it's a matter of stepping outside of the bubble that we're in. Like, I'm only going to study the stuff that, has been written by Hatsumi Sensei or, in our lineages or whatever, or people told me that. And we research Japanese history around a given time and understand how life was. And perhaps that'll shed light on who's full of shit and who might actually know something. Because one of the biggest problems that people have, at least with the martial art, is they keep trying to translate ancient Japanese stuff based on modern Western life. Okay. Anyway, so that's why we keep doing these. That's why not just we keep doing. We have these different modules, right? Because they're different approaches, and the more of these things that we have, it gives us a sense of strategic flexibility, right? What if I'm on the defense and it's not working, or I realize based on assessing what's going on or knowing a particular attacker or just having a certain type of experience that if this guy gets the first shot in, I'm fucking dead. This is not going to go well, right? So we need to have a sense of strategic flexibility. And while it's great to have these different lineages and the different scrolls and being able to label things and all that, I think Hatsumi Sensei has been a great example over the decades that I've trained with him to break free of that and to look at things based on themes, right? There's been the theme of the year, or what do they call that? The theme? Is it the theme? Budokan training theme of the year. Is that what it is? Okay. So I'm talking to James. Well, there he is, that little window. So to have this and to approach it from that kind of perspective, right? So I've been talking about this for weeks, but I've also had a issue with mother-in-law that we had to get her moved and all kinds of stuff. So it really put a botch on things and slowed things down. But many of you will be happy to know that keep asking about it. That I finally get everything finished, and we are ready to open the doors on the relaunch of what we call our Mod 3. So it's intermediate. Mod 3 is intermediate level 2, right? Because we have basic, then we have intermediate. We have 2 modules that are intermediate first level, and then we have the ones that are more of a black belt prep. So I call them intermediate advanced before we move into the advanced levels. So we're going to be focusing on this preemptive intercepting, and classes are going to start this Friday for anybody that's interested. So James, can you put the URL up? Do you remember it? I mean, I can recite it back. It's on the onlineninjaacademy.com site, and I decided this time to give it a really cool name, right? So we're calling this one "Dominate and Win." It's still our Mod 3. It's the realm of the committed warrior, and so we're going to be looking at concepts like speed and those kind of things from a very different perspective, because it's ninjutsu, right? And I'm not looking at it. This is not made up stuff. This is things that people have to do as a transition, right? We have to lose wind up. We have to lose tells. We have to move more directly, right? That's what creates speed, not necessarily moving your muscles or contracting the muscles faster or trying to move a limb faster or whatever. It's learning how to do things and pulling up lessons that were done in Mod 1 and Mod 2 that, look, damn it, we need to take this more seriously. We taught you how to use your eyes a certain way because it automatically makes your brain 250 times faster when you do this thing with your eyes than if you do this other thing that is what everybody does, right? If you do it the quote unquote normal way, you're slower from the beginning because your brain doesn't process the information as fast. So if we combine all this stuff together, we can change the paradigm quite significantly, right? So anyway, Dominate and Win, the realm of the committed warrior classes. The first lessons come out this Friday, and it's more of a personal development kind of thing, and a prep for what's going to be going on, the video lessons and all that. And then the first technique lessons come out on Monday. James, did we decide? Are we still doing the Zoom Q&A thing? Is that still on Monday? We didn't move that, right? That's still on Monday. Okay. So we have a weekly Q&A, but it's also a live Zoom class from the dojo, right? You get a chance to see what students are working on that way. You get a chance to ask questions, move around a little bit, have me or one of the other instructors critique what's going on. But anyway, all the information's on the page. So onlineninjaacademy.com/dominate-and-win. Try to keep it as short as possible so it doesn't confuse anybody. You can check that kind of stuff out, jump on board. I have already had questions from people. Do I have to do it this time? What's the benefit? Well, the benefit is there's access to me and there's live components to things this time around. It'll become another one of the do-it-yourself or self-led kind of things later. But the question was, if I don't do it now, you're going to run this one again. I will not be running it as a live course. We are in the process of relaunching, redoing, updating all of our training all the way up for right now into the foreseeable future to at least the 2nd to 3rd degree training. If I live long enough, we'll keep doing more and more. But the first goal is to get all the 5 modules from white belt to black belt redone. So they are 16-week courses, which means that's 4 months. So with turnaround time and getting things changed into evergreen and whatnot, James, we're probably looking at what, 5 to 6 months before anybody could enroll in it after we get it rolled out, unless I figure out some other way to make it happen. But it keeps he and I and Drew or any of the other black belts that help out with techniques just jumping from week to week, because we end up with, would we end up just on average across mod 1 and mod 2, 50, give or take 50, 55 technique videos, about the same number of skill and drill videos, and then somewhere between 60 and 70 personal development / strategy / martial philosophy lessons. So in these in the things, and that means not just shooting the videos, but also editing, uploading, all kinds of stuff, right? So we will be hopping for 16 weeks, right? Anyway, that's what we got. I will be rolling out the emails letting people know that the doors are open tomorrow. But anybody that's on this, if you want to jump in now, you can do that. Everything is certainly in place, but it's not official yet. So anyway, and if you're listening to this after, let's see, probably not going to be doing anything. Let's see, we're running the promotions for it all week. The introductory lessons start on the 31st, which is pretty much just a welcome, and here's how to set yourself up for what do you call it? Success. And then classes start on Monday, June 3rd. So even on the outside chance that I decide to extend things because people can catch up that week, through the 6th, if you're listening to this and or taking action after, I would say June 5th, June 6th, the doors will be closed for it. That's what we did before, right, James? We just, you couldn't enroll after a certain point. We just, the buttons on the pages and all that just go away, because it becomes too difficult on our side to handle all the questions and comments and whatnot that come in after people start late on these live things. So, and on top of that, I'm rounding out a Goshinbo program. We have classes at the dojo regularly and all that. So it just becomes too much on our end. So people need to understand. Well, they don't need to understand. It's just the reality of things for the logistics and whatnot, right? Which is a warrior skill, right? Maybe not a foot soldier skill, but definitely for a chunin or a jonin, right? Logistics and strategic planning, all those kind of things. So anyway, did you already put it in there? Is it already there? Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's do this. Let's open things up. Questions, comments. I just rambled on for all that time, and I'm sure I put some people to sleep, but either way, right? This is I don't know. It's not an easy lesson. And I certainly didn't want to come across like, hey, sacrifice and death and dying and which would be just, there's a cognitive disconnect. So, all right. What do you got, James? Questions, comments? Do you have anything to throw on top of this fire? Any part of you die so far? I don't think any of us are the same that we were. And the better you get at this and the more willing you are to do things, it just happens more often. There's this concept in Mikyo. It was actually an alternate term or a title. Not really a title. It was a word used by the Buddha himself to describe himself. It's called Tathagata. Tathagata means thus come, thus gone, which is, it indicated that in every moment, the past me is gone. There is a present me, but it's about to go as well, because we are constantly changing. And to embrace that and actually nurture it, it's like starting a ball rolling at the top of a hill, and it takes a little bit, but eventually it just keeps on going, right? And it adapts to things as it goes. And sometimes it's bouncing, sometimes it's rolling, sometimes whatever. So anyway, what do you got? Questions, comments?
Back from a little earlier, Dave said yes, he was in Iraq when you asked if,
Yeah, I thought.
and he also said he had learned before you had asked about if there was anything that they learned, and then
Was it the techniques where
yeah, that's
your teacher did something that you were like, shit?
yeah. He said the behind the back lateral kick. My dad called it the missionary kick when I was a kid. That and Kogodosh. My dad taught me that as the peak.
Yeah, cool beans. Anybody else?
And Merrill Barnett just wanted to say good evening. And then Dave just said we are all dead men walking.
Of course. Of course. I think the purpose is, and people want to, it's a purpose of life or whatever. Just don't be somebody who's just existing. Right. So anyway, there was a song by, I'm going to sound old, and he was old when I was young. There was a singer long time ago. His name was Roger Whittaker. And I think I was born with an old soul because my parents would play this music. And I've always been a lyrics kind of person. And it just struck. But one of the songs, and I can't remember the name of the song, but this is just one of those things that just gets burned into the psyche. One of the part of the lyrics, right, is it's not the day we're born. It's like the day we take our first breath, something like that, right? Is the day we start to die. Right? So make the best of it, yeah? Because otherwise, what's the alternative? Being pissy and miserable and, right, expecting things will just go my way, but I'm not doing anything to help produce it because there's a conscious, unconscious, or subconscious belief that, I can't, or I'm not good enough, or whatever. And we can say things out loud. I am good enough, whatever, except that there's a lump in our throat or a knot in our gut when we have to talk to somebody that is influential, but it's probably going to say no anyway. Well, how the hell do you know, right? One of my teachers gave me a thing one time. It was just a small card. It said 2 rules for life. Rule number 1, you don't get what you want unless you ask, or you'll never get what you want unless you ask. Rule number 2. Rule number 2 was see rule number 1, something like that. Don't forget rule number 1. They might say no. They might. But what's that? I just told my son this the other day. Right? If you try, you still might fail. If you never try, you're guaranteed to fail. Well, that sucks. I don't like it. Anyway, what else?
Dave said Roger Whittaker has the best Christmas album.
See, this is what happens when I talk to people my age. Thanks, Dave. I think they had that album too. And you probably remember the first time you were surprised to find out that the guy who played Gomer Pyle had an awesome singing voice and didn't sound like Gomer Pyle. And most people are like, who the hell's Gomer Pyle? Yep, that's exactly. Was it Jim Neighbors? That was his name, Jim Neighbors. Yeah. Golly, Sergeant. Gomer Pyle, USMC. Which is still how I see the USMC. Sorry. No, it isn't. I got too many Marine friends. Is that it? Is that all there is?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, I hope to see some folks jumping into the program. We got a week to wind up. So anybody gets in early, we'll probably toss some, I don't know, worksheet. I mean, there's already worksheets and stuff on the download page, right? A download page at the moment does not say dominate and win. It says mod 3. And there's a big old freaking blazing orange build on it, which is how it matches up for my internal guys. But there are worksheets and workbooks and all kinds of things to keep people busy. But anyway, I think that's it. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. And so Wednesday, what am I doing on Wednesday? Oh, Whiteboard Wednesday. I think this week is knife. I know some knife stuff, I think. We'll find out. All right. I think that's it. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. We'll see everybody next time on Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday.
Get more of KUDEN Radio, subscribe through your favorite podcasting site, or join our clan of serious modern warriors at onlineninjaacademy.com.